Here to discuss all that and more is one of your favourites, the Vice-President of the Federal Liberal Party, Teena McQueen. Teena, lovely to have you on the show. Let's kick it off with the tough stuff, hey? Are we losing our sense of society, or have I got this all wrong?
No, Cory, sadly I agree with you, but the only thing that I keeps ringing my ear is what Margaret Thatcher used to say, the facts of life are conservative. So sadly we've just got to keep up the fight. And to add to all those things you mentioned in your opening statement, I mean, COVID hasn't helped. People have just been sitting home, getting paid to do so. The fact that now that children at schools, in many schools, can, swap genders if they want to, not have to tell their parents. I mean, everywhere you look, it's terrible, and there's no rule of law. And the people in the phones, I mean, here we've got the trams running up and down Sydney. The number of people I nearly see run over on a daily basis, then try to abuse the poor tram driver. I mean, I don't know what we're going to do about it, Cory, but we don't have a choice. We must fight on.
Yeah, my wife will tell people that my great complaint is people don't know how to walk anymore because they can't even keep to one side of the pavement or another. They're not aware of other people around them. And then you double that up with mobile phones as well, it's becoming even worse.
There's just a general
what do we do about this?
There's a general lack of consideration for others, Cory. I think it's as simple as that, but technology certainly has played a dreadful part. I mean, there's a story about a boys' school in Sydney today with some dreadful things going around on a WhatsApp message. And it's frightening. And this is all influenced by they've got access to their phones 24/7. They feel the freedom to say what they want to and think there's no repercussions for it.
And they're exposed to a whole bunch of grotesque images and actions that young minds are far too young to comprehend as wrong. And unfortunately, they pick up those habits and they go with them right through. But you mentioned COVID, Teena, and this is one of the things I heard today. There's been a 30% increase in young people hospitalised with mental illness over the last 5 years. Now, how is that we're actually bringing up a generation of people who are suffering from mental illness? There's no shame in that, but something's got to be causing it. And COVID wouldn't have helped, would it? Because they've been isolated, left alone with their own thoughts, not educated, not socialised. It's become a huge issue.
That's right. And every person in every household has a tablet of some form. So everyone's glued to their own individual piece of equipment. And there's very little interaction. I mean, it's dreadful what's happened to kids during COVID. And I don't know how we ever catch up on that, Cory. And it can never, ever happen again. I think that's the lesson learned. But it's sad. I often demise and I make sure I put that extra time in with my grandchildren who are luckily live in the country and escape a lot of the city sins. But I think it's up to parents and grandparents to really put that extra time and effort in to spend time with the kids to try and compensate for what they've missed out during those lost COVID period, as I call it.
Yeah, it's sad to say though, Teena, I'm not convinced that a lot of parents are actually equipped to instill these lessons in their children anymore. I think they've outsourced it to government, to teachers, and the kids have been indoctrinated. Which brings me to this question. How can we bring young people back to a connection with our culture? It's important politically to understand why the political ideologies exist, but it's more about, standing on the shoulders that have built a great country. And if you undermine those things, you're going to weaken the country going forward, aren't you?
I try to keep it simple, Cory, and teach them what's right. Be kind, considerate, and teach them what's right. And let them know the true history of how this nation in particular was built. I mean, the brainwashing has to stop. And again, I don't know how we do that, but at some stage it will turn, Cory. As you said, we'll be rid of all these lefties in power at the moment. And when people are suffer, I think they'll suddenly come to their senses.
Yeah, rid of all the lefties in power. Okay, there's a segue straight into the Liberal Party. And I know I can get you into trouble by asking you about the Liberal Party. But, okay, there's a lot of people who feel a bit disappointed about that the centre-right of politics is no longer seemingly the centre-right. It's sort of drifting to the left. It's more right than the Labor Party, but the Labor Party are where the Greens used to be and the Greens are where the Communists have always positioned themselves. What are we going to do to firm up the battle of ideas rather than morph into this sort of centrist popularity contest?
I think that some of the Liberals think they have to make everybody happy, please everybody, and drift a little bit to the left to do that. But from the last federal election results, they should realise that's not the case. Stand firm on your principles and you'll have a solid base behind you. That's the only way to win elections. We've got a thoroughly decent Premier in New South Wales. It would be a travesty if he lost the election next year. So, and he's a good, decent man. And hopefully everyone will get behind him and keep him in power. It's our only hope.
All right. Now, Teena, you've had a win. A couple of weeks ago on this show, you said you've got to get more pensioners back into work. We've got to have some incentives for them. We covered it with a young bloke named Kian Hussey last week. But today, Albo, he's back to you. Have a look at what he had to say.
This is something that I raised in one of my vision statements in Brisbane, one of the first ones we did in 2020, speaking about the ageing of the population and how we value older Australians and enable them, facilitate them to make a greater contribution. This is a time-limited measure to see how that works.
People in Parliament House are already referring to this as the Teena McQueen Amendment. What did you make of it, Teena? Is it all that you wanted?
No, it's nothing at all like it. I think the measures he's put in place only last for 9 months. It equates to less than half a day's extra work a week, around $4,000 a year. It's not gonna cut it. You know, it's disappointing. I think what Mr. Dutton proposed was more than double that. You know, why bother if you're going to limit the pensioners and vets to a measly extra day, half a day's work? If you're going to do it right, Albo. Don't half do it, you know. And it wasn't his idea. It didn't come from him. Mrs. Reinhardt, one of the great minds of the country, I think first proposed this, and others jumped on that one because they thought it was such a good idea and been continually pushing it. But this is not fair to the pensioners. They need more than that, Cory.
All right, we'll keep pushing then, Teena, but your method of do it once, do it right is a lesson not only for politicians, but for all the young people out there as well. It's what we should be embracing. Teena McQueen, thank you very much for your time and joining me on Bernardi tonight.